Never mortgage your future for the present, right? You have to be very careful, especially in the early days. It's quite easy to do that. Whether it's the type of investors you choose or the type of business models you pick up or the type of technology that you bet your company on.
So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission. I'm your host, Simon Leach, and today I've got a special guest, Praveen, Penmetsa, CEO and founder of a company called Monarch Tractors. Monarch Tractors are a company revolutionizing agriculture with electric autonomous technology. Amazingly, founded in 2018. I mean, it's only like 7 years here, but this growth trajectory has been pretty incredible. I mean, I think from a financing viewpoint, culminating in some type of Series C of about $130 million, I think mid last year, marking a real major milestone in the scaling journey of the company. And today we're going to really dive in with Praveen, I suppose, really learning a little bit more about the mission and where the company are heading. And really, we want to key in here to some of the key lessons for building a real high growth kind of company. So Praveen, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
Now, great. Now tell me, your career, it seems to have spanned kind of several industries and innovations, as it were. I'd love to just dive into, I suppose, what were the most influential professional or personal experiences that were influential in you, those founding or helping you found Monarch Tractors?
Yeah, I think it's a blast from the past, Simon, but my life started off in the automotive industry. Growing up, I was always a car guy, quote unquote. So very fortunate to have ended up in Southern California, huge amounts of car culture and car innovation. So being exposed to that innovation culture of saying, okay, this is what it is today, but what could it be tomorrow? How do we bring these visions to life, right? Where it's a combination of not just technology, but also technology, art, right? And, the business side, all of them coming together. Had some very interesting projects in my early days where I worked on unmanned robots in the early 2000s, worked on an electric car in 2003 that ended up on the cover of Road and Track magazine. I did a battery pack for that. I mean, just to put that into context, Tesla was founded, I think, in 2005. It's like 3 years ahead of that, right? So again, very often, sometimes it's a matter of luck as well. I was in the right place at the right time to see some of these things happen. Mm-hmm. And being exposed to that journey played a big part in the mindset of of the art of the possible, right? So having worked on those things, that also then led me to work on battery systems and energy storage. Saw two industries, automotive and energy, transform between 2005 and 2015, right? Where these industries were treated as, fairly low on the innovation scale, very hard to disrupt. But then within 10 years, the whole landscape had changed. So seeing those two things happen was a huge inspiration to know that not only can these industries transform, but we can play a leading role in that. And all of that kind of led me to starting Monarch, to again focus on another industry that could use a transformation, and I felt was ready for transformation back in 2018, with a combination of clever technology, the right product, and the right business model.
Yeah, got it. Tell me, were those meetings back in the day when you're thinking about, agriculture, when you're thinking about some of the battery systems and some of the automotive, when it came to agriculture and the disruptive nature, was it like meeting a couple of co-founders or something like that really got you dialed in to agriculture and the kind of issues and opportunities within it, was it?
No, I think the interesting thing was being able to work on some core technologies and concepts. Like the big thing that really started off down this path of Monarch was two big events. Event number one was we were working on electric cars back in 2012, right? And by then, the major OEMs had started to think about electric vehicles. And we got a project on how do we use the electric vehicle to power the house, right? So it's a very different kind of thought process. And that was a launch pad for us to think about, if you can use an electric vehicle to power a house, it's exciting, but not game changing. The game changing thought that came up was going back to India, seeing rural communities struggle with energy, especially out in the field, how we power agriculture, and saying, okay, what is the right vehicle to power agriculture? And then the answer is quite obvious, right? It's probably a tractor, not a car. So, so that was one event number one, that coalesced into that. So then I went out and found the right kind of co-founders that can help with that part. The second part was looking at autonomous vehicles back in, again, around, this was 3-4 years down the line. In 2015, 2016, we were working on autonomous vehicles for on-road. But then talking to farmers, realized that, hey, there's an even more, in certain sense, an even more complex challenge of driving a tractor and doing operations, but in some sense, much easier in terms of a on-farm, no public roads, no people around, controlled environment, etc. So mashing these two ideas and getting the right people around it was the big aha moment, right? And being able to see it early on before these things became quite commoditized, right? Back in 2018, when we started talking about electric autonomous tractors, people were like, what are you talking about, right? Farmers will not buy electric. Autonomous is not ready. Autonomous requires a lot of capital. It's going to be expensive tractors. There were a lot of upfront challenges, but I could see where the macro trend was going, and I knew that the cost of hardware would come down, etc. So those were the two big distilling events that led us to start Monarch as an energy platform, as an automation platform, and a data platform.
Yeah, and you couldn't have foreseen COVID coming probably about 18 months after you started. But as you look back now and you think about COVID, what was the impact on COVID on the business, you think?
Oh, huge, right? And like always, the timing was just terrible. I remember having our first strategic investor conversation, right? And this team had flown in from Korea in February 2020, right? This was and April, May was the lockdowns in the US. And we were just starting to hear rumblings of some virus that was starting to make its way, and that we should be a little careful with international travel and international demonstrations, right? So, but from a timing standpoint, there were certain elements that did not work in our favor. But also, COVID really put a spotlight on our food ecosystem. For the first time, I think all of us were stuck at home. We all started to think about, hey, where does our food come from? It's not just the grocery shelf. The food supply chain shut down for a while. Shelves were empty here, right? So those kind of things, I think, were, on the whole, the macro was much more supportive. Also, people started focusing more on the fact that it's not, just because it shows up on the grocery shelf doesn't mean that, that's the end all be all. We started growing our food. We started cooking more. And fundamentally, that started a big revolution in terms of people paying attention to food supply chains globally. Companies started to think differently, right? So all of this came down to one distilling statement, Simon. For the first time, the large food and beverage companies and consumers wanted transparency in the food supply chain. And that really helped us a lot, because the one part that we don't know what happens with our food is on the farm.
Yeah.
Once it enters the supply chain, once it's being transported from the farm to a processor to grocery, that we can follow.
Yeah.
But right now we don't, right? So that was a huge game-changing event for us. People started to look at it. Also, COVID basically meant that labor disappeared from the farm. Completely changed how we started thinking about farm automation. So the second part of our element was also huge. So those two things really changed, were game changers for us for food, and especially for our industry
Mm.
and our solution specifically.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known this at the time when you heard about the virus, but it sounds like the virus has had it's been responsible for some fundamental shifts that you've really taken advantage of as it relates to the kind of growth of the business, actually. And it's interesting how things turn out, isn't it, really? You never quite know, do you? And So tell us a little bit about the value proposition. I'd love to dive into it a little bit more. We covered a little bit on some of that, as it were.
Yeah, the simple thing for us was, again, when we look at these industries that need transformation, we also have to be very clear about why these industries have not transformed in the past. Very often, I think, I'm an optimist. You have to be one, right? If you're an entrepreneur. But very often we don't pay credence to why has this industry not transformed if we all think it should be, right? So when we looked at agriculture, the big issues were, the farmer who uses the equipment and the farmer who's growing the crops has a lot of other stakeholders, right? So he's selling to a large food and beverage company. The government is involved when it comes to regulations, right? There's a lot of fertilizer companies. There's a lot of pesticide companies. So there's a whole host of players in this space. And the challenge was the farmer actually does not make a lot of money. So expecting the farmer to take a risk, get new technology onto the farm, right, was a big friction point. So we had to then figure out how do we de-risk it, right? So that's when our energy platform plus our autonomy and data platform was a clever idea, technologically very possible, but the business side also had to be thought through. And that's when we spent a fair amount of time actually, doing the back end work of like, who are the other stakeholders that can accelerate this adoption for the farmer, de-risk it for the farmer. Otherwise, we are basically running into the same challenges that have prevented this industry from transforming.
Yeah. Which is something I've heard about for the last 7 or 8 years, the overwhelming nature of the farmer, right? And adopting technology. Yeah.
Right. It's a little bit like this, right? Like the way I talk to people inside the company is the farmer only gets 40 attempts in his whole lifetime, right? So anytime you ask him to do something different, you're basically using up one of those attempts. So that's not conducive to risk taking, right? So we have to make sure that it's not a risky endeavor. So what we did, long story short, was we used the decarbonization element of our solution, the fact that it's electric, the fact that it's an energy platform. We brought in other stakeholders like government agencies, state agencies, carbon credits, the large food and beverage companies that cared about sustainability to really put an incentive on the plate for the farmers to use the solution as an accelerant. So that was important. And our solution actually took that into effect by not only being an energy platform, but also providing that data to say, this is how much we displaced, this is how many hours we use, this is what we use the energy for, etc. Right? So that's a clever way of how do you use energy to fulfill some other stakeholder's wishes and then provide that back to the user, who's the farmer. So that was a big innovation on our side. Even today, we are the only tractor in the world that generates carbon credits as the farmer uses them. We've been able to convince large companies like Danone, etc., to incentivize their supply chain, i.e. their farmers, to use the technology with no risk to them, right? And then everybody gets a benefit out of it. So a different way of thinking about it. So that was a big coalescing movement. And actually, that's what we started the company off with. Initially, a lot of our work was on the policy work. A lot of work was being thought leadership, telling people why the solution could help, while we were solving the big technology problems. Again, even today, we are the only electric autonomous tractor that you can purchase and use. It's quite amazing if you think about an industry that has some giants like John Deere, etc. They still are not selling one, right? So we're well ahead of the game here.
So, a couple of things. Just on that final part, how come you've been able to get so far ahead of the game as it relates to one of these electric tractors on the field? What has been the real kind of roadblock that you've kind of solved that others can't?
Yeah. So, Simon, that's a great question, right? And something that our investors also in the early days actually said we were trying to do too much. Having come from the automotive world, I knew that just making an electric tractor is not enough. It's not enough for the farmer, not enough of a competitive moat, right? It really doesn't provide enough value. So the fact that we took an electric energy platform, combined it with a digital platform, and layered autonomy on top of it was a very complex solution, right? Especially in 2018. Not only that, for a startup to take that vision of this is how farming could and should be. This is how machines on the farm could and should be. This is a machine that we want every farmer in the world to use. Hence, we're going to focus on a small machine that is affordable. Was basically when we said that the first time around, people said it's not possible, right? So that allowed us to get going very quickly. So it's a lesson that I learned is very often Audacity is is actually your friend as a startup, right? It gives you a moat. It allows you to coalesce people behind you, allows you to bring partners to the table. Playing it safe is something that the big companies are good at, right? Our job as entrepreneurs is to really change the nature of the game itself. So that's something that we did. And I think early on, we also realized that there were big issues, right? And having come from the automotive industry, for example, the hardware cost of autonomy equipment was very high. So, but we could see where the world was going. We were like, hey, this whole, camera, vision, perception technology is going to get better. So it's lower cost. Let's bet our company on it, right? So we made a lot of those bets that were very audacious in those days. People were like, what do you mean you're going to run an autonomous car without any LiDARs or radars, right? That's not even possible, was the theme in 2018. We were the first company to do it. We were the first company to say we're going to put a very big battery on our tractor, right? And we're going to get the cost down by leveraging some of the lessons learned from automotive, etc., and then bring it in. Battery swap, something that had failed in other industries, we bet our company on that. So there were a lot of these bets that we made very thoughtfully, and then we worked on de-risking them. So that's what gave us this advantage, right? So today, we now have a 6-year head start as a camera, vision, AI perception company, right? At a time when only in the last 2 years are people actually doing the things that we started doing back in 2018. So those are things that I think are huge lessons for not only us. And don't get me wrong, not all of them worked, and they won't. But we have to take those chances and put your company on a foundation that is strong. So playing it safe, playing it easy, playing for an acquisition, those are not the things that I do.
Yeah, no, I love it. Just with that, I mean, there's complex technical and technology things you're layering on top of each other.
Right.
Where did you find the talent from? What industry? I mean, what? I mean, clearly building quality team would have been really important for this as well. Tell me a little bit around that journey of bringing top talent in that can execute this audacious plan, as it were.
Yeah, that's a great question, Simon. Sitting in Silicon Valley back in 2018, right, when on-road mobility was quite hard. It was very hard to attract talent, right? For me to say, hey, you're going to get away from this nice swanky office where you have beer on tap, right? This is 2018, remember? So things have changed a bit. But you're going to sit on a farm out in the sun with our machine, right? It was quite challenging. But again, what we focused on was mission first, right? So we looked for people who really bought into our mission and said, I really want to do something that's good for the farmer and good for the farm ecosystem and good for our food ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we actually brought on board a lot of people that believed in what our food ecosystem should be, right? So that was number one. That really allowed us to differentiate ourselves from all of these other technology-focused companies. The second thing was the huge challenge that we put on the table, saying that, yes, this thing not only has to work, but also has to be farmer frugal. has to be affordable by the farmer, has to work out in the dull, dirty, and dangerous environment of a farm. So we reframed the technical challenge in such a way that the mission was great, the technical challenge was unique and different, right? And we had to look outside of the box. We actually moved people from other parts of the world and brought them on board, right? So again, we had to kind of change the game a little bit. So we didn't just go after the same people that were in these industries before, right? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you for that. And just one other thing, and I'm diving back, but something you said about the thought leadership kind of piece, about, clearly you spent a lot of time with that. You mentioned policy people, you mentioned, Danone and some of the, as it relates to their supply chain. How difficult was that as a journey, bringing people together, driving a consensus, really understanding and creating a value proposition? Tell us a little bit around that part of it, because you made it sound so easy.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard to find that time when you're busy building the team, raising capital, executing on the technical vision. But there's a difference between an ambition to change the industry and just putting another new consumer product out there, right? So for us, my focus was, we knew what the challenge was. The challenge was we're going to be a transformational agent for the whole on-farm, ecosystem in the world, which then immediately means that we have to play a role in changing mindsets and perception. So the first meeting that the 4 founders had was, we went and met the state of California here. And we talked to the policy people there, and we said, hey, we just started this company, right? There's 4 of us. In 2 years, we're going to have this product out there, and we need your support to make sure that the farmers can afford this, right? How can we work together? And then their mindset was very weird. They said, no, we keep talking to all these tractor companies today, and they all said that this is not possible. We said, well, we're going to prove otherwise. But if we do, can we count on your support, right? So that's the kind of mindset changes that we had to go and do. And then we also were the first company to basically say, hey, sustainability should be a focus, right? Sustainability and farmer profitability go hand in hand. This is not an or conversation. This is an and conversation. We were the first few people to really focus on how sustainability can make more money for farmers. So kind of doing that work was quite important. And yes, it also allowed us to, you talked about talent, right? All of that thought leadership work basically created a recruiting pipeline. It created a partnership pipeline. So a lot of suppliers who otherwise would not sign up to support a startup company back in 2019, 2020, because they saw what this was, because they believed in this very unique, audacious story, came on board. So Simon, it's not just about doing it I think there are rewards to it, is the way I would think about it.
Yeah.
There was a self-serving element there, apart from changing the mindsets of the industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You probably had to look at a lot of the lessons that other companies have made when it comes to introducing technology out there in the field, right, as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So we looked for inspiration to companies that had really changed the game in their respective industries, right? And they all follow a common arc to a certain extent. So we were trying to do the same thing, right? Thought leadership, very often you will see that element on transformational companies, right? The first company to come in often has to play that role. So it's not unique to us. The second piece is also reframing how we think about not only the technology side, but also the business side, right? The business model innovation is also quite important. And that's how we started looking at the policy side to say, hey, maybe this tractor should not be paid for in full by the farmer, right? Maybe they should get support from other people, right? So whether it's the government or whether it's their customers. So we were the first company to actually say, the equipment that ends up on your farm, will be influenced by your customer,
right,
Mr. Farmer, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, we had to do all of those things to make that happen, and that's what makes the journey so much fun and exciting.
Yeah. You mentioned Danone. Are there lots of other companies that have kind of complex food kind of chain systems that are joining the party as well? And is it much more an open dialogue now with these companies?
No, what we're now learning is there's a lot more companies like that, right? And our food ecosystem is immensely fragmented. So, we are now talking to other companies like, some of the nutritionists, right? Some of the people who actually play a role in kind of suggesting what fertilizer should end up on the farm or what feed should be fed to the livestock, right? These were another big influencers, right? Because they touch so many people and they're quite respected in the industry. So we wanted to give them a tool that they can use from our tractor as well. So they became huge advocates for us. They became some of the consumers of our data as well. They went out to to the farmers in their ecosystem saying, I usually tell you what you should, put on the farm, but I should also, you should also look at this Monarch tractor because that will make you better and it'll make my job easier, right? And here's a way to do it. And I can help save you, right? So those were some of the new incentives and new models that we kind of created. The other thing that we also did, Simon, was started working with carbon credit companies, etc., to really monetize this data that's coming up and incentivizing farmers with that. Like the implement companies were also another big advocates for ours. So these are all other stakeholders around the farmer. So usually it's the tractor that drives the implement, but now there's some new smart implements coming, and those are our partners. So that when they recommend to the farmer that, hey, you should really buy the tractor, we kind of inversed that loop there, right? So we're doing a lot of that these days.
Yeah, no, great. And tell me though, when it comes to things like pesticides and spray, and how does it kind of does it make the farmer more efficient about how often they need to spray and what they need to spray?
Yeah, essentially if we just take the macro view, right? What happened in the last 150 years is first we replaced livestock on the farm that we used for buffaloes and stuff for like tilling and horses for like tilling and stuff, right? We replaced them with machines and people, and then we replaced them with chemicals. And that's how, we actually got the amount of labor on the farm down. Is instead of us going and cutting the grass 10 times, we sprayed the chemical ones, right? So humans got replaced by chemicals. What we are trying to do now is to replace those chemicals by robots, right? So, because we're all learning that too much chemicals is not profitable for the farmer, nor is it, good from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah.
Or the soil. So what our tractor does is it takes that labor element and makes it more efficient, right? So we are saying, hey, you don't need to spray chemicals. What if you have a machine that can actually go out and cut the grass 10 times without, you having to pay for the diesel cost or pay for a driver sitting on this thing going up and down the farm? So that's a big advantage for us, right? Is in replacing chemicals with automated, low cost, clean energy machines.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is being more targeted. It's very hard for the farmers to know where and how much they should spray out there, right? So the fact that our machine goes up and down, the fact that we have cameras on our tractor that we use for our autonomy, the same cameras also provide guidance back saying, hey, this is what the field looks like. By the way, we noticed this out here, right? And we don't, Monarch does not need to do all of this. We can, but actually now we have partners who use our data as apps and then provide those insights and reports back to farmers, right? So they're using our camera data, right? So they're using our camera data to provide these insights to the farmers where they say, hey, this is where you need to spray. The fact that they can pinpoint that means that you don't need to spray the whole farm.
Yeah.
We can now reduce the amount of chemicals as well. So two things, right? So we are replacing all the indiscriminate spraying down replacing that with mowing, mechanical operations. Secondly, targeted insights of like, this is where you should probably pay attention to, and maybe this is the only place where you should spray.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the kind of things that are possible. And again, we are enabling the ecosystem as well. It's a platform play. Every farm is different, every crop is different, right? So the fact that we can actually provide this data to the farmers, but also to other new host of AI companies that are cropping up. They all can now write their own quick AI application and deploy it with our Wingspan AI.
Awesome.
Right? And address the farmer. So that's how this makes, this is a game changer.
Yeah, no, I love it. Tell me, where is the business today then in terms of, give us some context in terms of size and scale, and how many robots have you got on the field at the moment?
Yeah, very proud of the fact that we are the leading robot company on the planet, right? We have like 500 plus robots in customers' hands that we sold, right? It's not a service model or a rental model per se. The farmers actually see so much value that they're buying them, which is huge. So 500 plus machines, number one. Right. Number two is also agriculture is a tremendously hard company to scale revenues as a startup into tens of millions of dollars. Right. We have already showcased, last year we did like $24 million in revenue, which is again an incredibly proud achievement for like our first year. And we're targeting doubling that this year, which is going to be huge. And also we're shifting more from tractor sales. Today, only 50% of our revenue, Simon, comes from hardware, right? From the robot sales. The other 50% is driven by our platform, right? Which is, we want to be, our Wingspan AI is, think of it as an Android for agriculture kind of analogy, right? So we are actually licensing our Wingspan AI to large farm equipment companies and off-road companies. And we're also collecting subscription revenue from farmers for autonomy and digital. So that's really, already 50% of our revenue is coming from that is a huge uptake, right? In an industry that has not seen this kind of fast adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the future, when you think about the future and the future growth, is it, how do you balance that, probably that larger CapEx, big spend with the machines? Look, business sounds a lot easier to scale with the latter model, right?
Yeah. No, it's an incredibly ambitious and audacious thing that we took on, right? As we essentially were building a full vertically integrated company, building the device, a tractor, that does everything an existing tractor does. So we have a machine that is big, that has a big battery, does everything an electric car does. Also has hydraulic power on it, powers all these implements and attachments, and works in a very crazy, hot, dusty environment. So we built that hardware. Then we had to layer on the autonomy element. How do we make this thing autonomous while pulling things of different sizes and stuff like that and controlling those things? And then we had to layer on, how do we capture all this data and provide value back to the farmer and the other stakeholders, right? So it's a very complex, vertically integrated solution that we had to develop, right? We had to build a machine, we had to build cloud infrastructure, we had to do AI autonomy, a lot of things, right? So quite challenging, but now we're at a great inflection point. Now that we have proven that the device has really unlocked the value of our platform. We've shown what a smart electric autonomous tractor can do, Simon. Our focus is now on how do we bring partners to the table to take on the heavy capex as much as possible, right? So, for example, for us, our tractor even today is built by Foxconn, right? So think of it as just like a smartphone or a smart device, right? We have a contract manufacturer building our smart device at scale to bring the cost down, to make it affordable. Similarly, we're also licensing our technology, just like our Wingspan AI, again, that Android thing, so that we can work with other equipment companies. We want to partner with them, not compete with them on the device side, right? Okay. So that allows us to remove that capex off our table as well, and really, leverage the value that we have built up on the platform side. So the future basically for us is more and more, we'll always build machines. Don't get me wrong. The best way to prove to an industry that there's value is to build a machine and deploy it. And then the rest of the industry then comes to the table. So we'll always do that. We're at a great inflection point where, we have also proven that we can do this at scale. So now it's a matter of getting the rest of the partners to the table, putting our technology on their machines, allowing them suddenly to go from the steel and manufacturing era of farm equipment to the digital, smart subscription era of farm operations. We want to be that catalyst for all of these companies, right? And there's 450 farm OEMs in the world, 500 million farms in the world. So we're quite excited about what we can do as a digital platform company going forward.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. The journey sounds incredible. And what about longer term goals, with this company? Yeah. Where do you see, how do you see yourself do you see yourself wanting to become acquired or to IPO? What's the dream these days, knowing the journey we've kind of been on, as it were?
No, as a platform company, as a transformational company, we are targeting going to the public markets at some point in the future. We don't know when, but we're targeting something in the 3 years outlook, right? In the meantime, our focus is very much on scale. We've done a lot of heavy, hard work to lay the foundation down. And sometimes when you lay the foundation down, it might not seem like much, but the fact that it's down there now really allows us to ramp this up, right? So that's what we are focused on in the next 3 years, is to roll out more automation to our farmers, go to new industries and new geographies, partner with new farm equipment and off-road companies. And then if we do that, I think, we can then start to, think about the public markets who will really value us as a transformational company versus some of the other options where they tend to pigeonhole us as, are you a tractor company? Right. Are you a software company?
Yeah.
And I think the public markets sometimes are much more sophisticated in how they value companies like ours.
Yeah. Okay, I've got it. And what about in terms of, just give me a sense of lots happening on the industry, in geopolitics at the moment, especially as the farmer is getting hit. So how, what's your view on where we are right now with that, as it were, and how it's affecting the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting few months, right, for everybody in the food ecosystem. I think people often forget that, our global supply chains are also very valid for our food. It's not just cars that are built around the world with supply chains. Our food also is very much globally interlinked, right? So, for example, there's a fair amount of food that goes from the US to China. People don't sometimes realize that, right? So, a lot of the food comes from Mexico here in the US, right? So, I think the fact that the global trade is now being reevaluated, especially with this whole tariffs and with food security becoming more and more important, I think is currently short term is applying a lot of pressure on farmers, number one. So they now suddenly have to figure out, right, whether they're competitive on the global marketplace or not. And with the tariff situation and in an ecosystem where farmers only make 3-4% margins, if there's a 10, 15, 20% tariffs that are being levied, that very quickly turns the economics upside down. So farmers are under tremendous pressure to figure out what this means for each and every one of them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's number one. So that uncertainty is never good, and I think it's going to take a while for us to figure the new supply chains out. The opportunities that come out of this are also quite important. I think there will be an increased focus on efficiency. So that I think is going to help. There'll be an increased focus on transparency on our food supply chain. Where was this grown? How many local resources were used for it, etc. These are all important things now, right? So even though it might be grown in the US, did we use, subsidized water? Did we use others? So all of those questions now, and where is it consumed, those supply chain transparency is also going to be quite important. So both those, I think, are key elements that we bring solutions for, whether it's in the form of automation for increased efficiency or data transparency of what happened on the farm and when. So that not only can you say where did this fruit come from, but what went into it, where did that come from is quite important. I think farmers and the food ecosystem, I think we're going to definitely see an impact. Not something that we were, it's not something that we were looking forward to, quite honestly, because it's quite challenging in the best of times. So now this is another dimension that we need to now think about and address. So the resiliency of our food ecosystem is being tested as well.
Yeah.
And Simon, just to also put a finer point on that, right? We also need to be very careful with our food ecosystems, because food ecosystems, unlike manufacturing, right, there's a seasonality to it that you cannot compress. So if we set things in motion, it's very hard for us to turn those things around later on when it comes to food, right? Manufacturing can happen 24/7, right? But when you talk about food, if you miss that season and if some global policy is going to drive a farmer to change a crop, it's going to take us at least 12, 24 months before that comes back online again, right? And we do that at scale, at a geography and a political level across countries. These are, these have huge ramifications that will last for a while.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful. So that's what also is quite challenging. We have to figure some of these things out. But there are opportunities as well.
Yeah, great. And but just to finish with, just like final question from me. When you think about advice you would offer for, say, 3 bits of advice you would offer for, I speak to a lot of early stage founders in agriculture and other innovation areas around climate, the seed or the A round. When it comes to the scaling journey, 3 bits of advice, you would have, knowing your journey and where you've come from.
Yeah. I'm still learning, to be honest. So people should take this with a pinch of salt. But a couple of things that I think we learned along the way was, never mortgage your future for the present. Right, you have to be very careful, especially in the early days. It's quite easy to do that. Whether it's the type of investors you choose, or the type of business models you pick up, or the type of technology that you bet your company on. You got to make sure that you're not mortgaging your future for the present. Right, that's a big one. The second one is something that I touched upon earlier on in our conversation, Simon. Is Audacity and risk are your friends. They are the ones that are your moat. When people say, what is your moat? It's our audacity of vision. It's our risk-taking ability, right? So don't be scared of it. At the same time, we should be ambitious, but we should not be naive, right? So we do have to address how we're going to overcome those risks. That's point number 2. Quite important. Number 3 is, we also have to think about building institutions, right? I'm a big believer that as startups, these are not just quick endeavors, right? We should not be very short term on that side. I'm a big believer that we bring a lot of energy to industries. We bring a lot of energy to the ecosystem. We play a vital role in mankind's progress. So we have to kind of think long-term, build institutions, right? Not short-term acquisitions, right?
Great.
That's my 3rd one. So those are the 3 bets I would leave you with.
Awesome. No, thank you, Praveen. Look, I could talk to you for hours, but I know you've got a company to run. So I just wanted to say thanks so much for coming on. It's been a fascinating journey, learning about, what you've had to navigate and where you've taken the company to. It's been a really inspiring conversation and journey, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing, and we wish you all the best for your future as well.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Appreciate the support.
No, absolutely. And thanks for all my guests kind of tuning into this week's show. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks so much.